James Day, public television pioneer and chairman of the CUNY TV Advisory Board, passed away in April 2008. His legacy includes the series Day at Night, which aired for 130 episodes beginning in 1973. The program features interviews with many of the great thinkers and achievers of the 20th century. These 30-year-old programs have been restored. The interviews remain fresh and relevant today, exploring issues that are still important to society. Showing them again is CUNY TV's tribute to Jim and his contributions to public television.
The name of Jonas Edward Salk entered our lives with startling and welcome suddenness nearly 20 years ago. It was 1955. The National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis had just announced the results of a nationwide test of the newly developed Salk vaccine. It worked. Crippling polio could be prevented. Almost overnight, Dr. Salk rose from the obscurity of a medical research laboratory to the role of an internationally acclaimed hero, his name a household word. But the role of celebrity proved an uncomfortable fit for a man who cherished his hours in the laboratory and had more work to do. In 1962, he founded the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, where a small group of senior scientists have been free to pursue independent study into the nature of the human organism. Some of Dr. Salk's own work at the Institute has resulted in 2 small books for the layman, published in the last several years: Man Unfolding and The Survival of the Wisest.
Dr. Salk, medical science in your own work included has wrought near miracles in keeping more people alive and keeping them alive longer, and in the process it's contributed to one of our most important problems today, that is the problem of overpopulation, of how this planet can sustain that kind of a population growth. Are we headed on an apocalyptic course?
Well, of course, what you just described is the result of our success.
Yes.
And success, not infrequently, leads to other problems that have to be dealt with, and this is an example of precisely that. There are many who look at the curve of population growth and see only the kind of course you've described or you mentioned, whereas there is another way of looking at the problem.
A more hopeful way?
Yes, more hopeful in the sense that nature has had this experience before.
Oh.
Nature has a way of controlling and regulating, so to speak, in the normal course of events, the growth, the level of a population of any organism, any species, any variety in a given ecosystem. Man is rather new in this respect. Man has now reached the point at which we may say that he is living in a closed system, meaning that there is a limit to the resources on the planet, and he will thereby be forced to accommodate himself and his numbers to those conditions.
But man as a thinking being is against the earlier forms of life you're talking about.
Yes.
He has his own will. He can make his own decisions.
Yes.
What if he doesn't make a decision to do just what you've described?
Well, I think you have to speak not of man in the sense of mankind, but men as individuals and as groups. There are some who will behave in a way that I think will prove to have been unwise, and there are some who will behave in a way that I believe will have proven to have been wise. Mm-hmm. Therefore, to ascribe to man generally the attributes or the behavior, the characteristics of one or the other would be inappropriate. Mm-hmm. We therefore must recognize that there will be some who will not survive, and there will be others who will contribute to the survival and evolution of mankind. We are at
This
a
is not exactly the survival of the fittest, then.
The fittest have survived up to this point. It is my contention that now we must speak of the survival of the wisest.
I see.
Which, as you know, is the title of the book that I was responsible for,
Yes.
that came out about a year ago. And
And how would you describe the wisest in this context?
those who understand the processes of nature and understand the nature of the evolutionary process and take it into consideration in their relationships to others, to themselves, and to nature and to the cosmos.
This is quite in contrast to what has been, because man has always fought nature. It's been
Yes.
the fight to overcome the forces of nature. Now you're saying that the wisest are those who, what, cooperate with
Yes,
nature?
those who will cooperate with nature and cooperate with the inevitabilities of the laws of nature.
This is the evolutionary process, then.
Exactly. And when man recognizes and understands and feels the force, feels and appreciates how the process of evolution works on him and in him, he will then be able to handle himself more effectively as an instrument, so to speak, of nature, in nature. What I am trying to convey is the idea that man is very much a part of nature and cannot regard himself as apart from nature. Because he has done so, and his thinking has not been very good when he comes to the conclusion or behaves as if he is not part of nature. Under those circumstances, he will of necessity, because of the nature of the process, slip off in the apocalyptic fashion, shall we say. And those who understand and have a sense of what we're speaking of will be those who will contribute to the survival of the species in the future.
How will we become wise? How will we become into possession of the wisdom you speak of? People like me, will it be when our feet are put to the fire and we're faced with a real disaster? Or will it be through education? Will it be through intuition? How?
All these ways.
Oh.
And if it is in a person to be wise, then he will learn in one way or another. If, on the other hand, he is so constructed or so crippled or so distorted in his perceptions, in his understanding, then he will respond inappropriately rather than appropriately.
He will not survive, so to speak, as the unwise man who doesn't come to these perceptions.
Yes. And you might say, well, how do we become wise, as you've asked a moment ago? Perhaps it would be better to think in terms of learning to behave as if we were wise. Because wisdom I see as an attribute, not unlike other talents and skills that need to be developed. There is something innate in those who have the characteristics and attributes that we associate with wisdom. And this is not necessarily associated with education either.
It isn't?
No, indeed not. You must remember that there are individuals who exhibit wisdom who have had no formal education. And wisdom is a word and a concept that antedated formalism in the educational process. Now, this does not mean that through education one cannot learn to behave as if one were wise, and one cannot enhance one's wisdom, so to speak, through the experiences that this affords. So that what you are, shall we say, focusing upon is something that I regard as of crucial importance and of the greatest importance at this particular point in evolutionary time, because I think that we are going through a phase change in which that which we have always regarded to be of value, namely wisdom, will now be a necessity. And this
It also suggests lots of other changes too, does it not?
Indeed.
Things that we placed high value upon today, we may place lower value upon tomorrow?
Indeed, and that's the nature of the phase change. I see us going through, see many evidences.
You do see evidence of it now?
Oh yes, yes. For some years now this has been accumulating, where that which was of value, of positive value, is now of negative value. By the same token, that which is of positive value now may have been of negative value before.
Yeah.
Now, I have used as a way of explaining this idea the familiar S-shaped growth curve, which is the so-called sigmoid curve, which we see in living systems, in which organisms increase in number, as is true of man.
Yeah.
They go through an exponential phase, very rapid growth, and then the population
So you anticipate that the
off.
population will level off at some higher level than we are at the moment, of course.
Yes, of course, because from the evidence, we are in that exponential phase of growth. Now, looking at the planet as a whole.
The period of change.
Yes. The period in which we are now is one of very rapid change, associated with a rapid increase in population.
What kind of values, excuse me, what
Yes.
kind of values do you see changing? Where do you see evidence of changes in the value system? In young people, for example? Is it?
Especially, they are born into what I think of as a new epoch. I refer to it as Epoch B, as distinct from Epoch A. And they are influenced in the shape of their thinking and of their perceptions by the world in which they are, into which they're born. In the same way, those who were born deeper into Epoch A, who are still alive, were shaped and formed in a different set of circumstances. There is no doubt that apart from the genetic differences amongst individuals, there are influences that help shape the orientation, perceptions, and values of those born at each point in time. It's self-evident that children who are born into a period where television is commonplace would have had different experiences than those born previously. We see evidences of this if we look at the different cultures on the face of the planet. So that I need not press too firmly to bring evidence to bear that there is an enormous variety in time and in space amongst individuals, attributable in part to genetic considerations and in part to environmental influences, circumstantial influences. Now, we see occurring on the planet as a whole an influence by virtue of the rapidity with which we are all in communication with one another, the shortness of distance, of time. The planet is literally becoming a single place rather than one that can be carved up reasonably into territories.
With increasing interdependence.
That is what characterizes the New World, essentially, and not a group of independent and a group of dependent nations, shall we say, but a group of independent nations that are interdependent. This is one of the characteristics of the new epoch, which comes about as a result of the natural evolutionary process, so that the problems with which we are confronted arise as a result of evolution, and we will emerge through them.
What is the process?
Also by evolutionary means.
What is the process of evolution? What are we headed toward? What is the growth, the movement?
I see evolution as not restricted to the idea that man has evolved from primates or from the ape. Nor do I see evolution restricted only to living things. I see evolution from the beginning of the universe, the beginning of the cosmos, let us say, as evidenced in part by the order that we see in the physical realm and in the chemical realm. If you look at the table of elements, the Mendeleev table of elements, you see the orderly arrangement according to atomic number and atomic weight. This must have arisen as a result of an evolutionary process. I can see how at one point in time in the course of physical-chemical evolution, life began. And it's easy to see the signs and evidences of the evolutionary process up to the point where man appeared, and there again a mutational event occurred so that man now is a living entity capable of perceiving himself as well as the universe around him.
Is he a sometime visitor on this planet?
Yes, just as the planet itself is a sometime visitor in the cosmos. The sun was born several millions of years ago, and it is estimated that it is likely to cool and perhaps become extinct as a source of energy useful for the Earth about 5,000 million years from now or 5 billion years from now.
What we've just been discussing, Dr. Salk, seems to be far removed from what you made your name in developing the Salk vaccine. I want to carry you back, if I may, into Epoch A, into your own life and your own education and your own destiny, which I gather was partially set by your mother, who I'm told was intensely ambitious for her 3 youngsters.
Yes.
I gather must have inspired you to go on to school and get the education you did. Did she want you to be a doctor?
No, she didn't really. That was the result of a compromise in a sense. I think her ambition was for me to be a teacher so that I would not have too strenuous and difficult a life. She was very overprotective. My preference was law, but we couldn't agree on that. And,
so medicine was the compromise.
So medicine was my choice, and at least I did not do what she wanted nor what I wanted, but something else.
Was your home a home where learning was much revered? Your father was in the garment industry.
Yes,
wasn't he?
no, there was no tradition of learning other than perhaps the tradition of the Jewish heritage, where of course learning was highly respected. But my mother had been an immigrant and was not able to read English very well, as a matter of fact, because she came to this country and very promptly went to work in order to help support the family. My father had not too much education up through elementary school. And nevertheless, my mother's desire was for her children to have as much education as possible.
And you were a very good student, apparently.
Well, I was and was not. It was rather uneven. There were some things that I was interested in more than others, but by and large I got
But
through
you did go to a high school
rapidly.
in New York, which was for outstanding or for
Yes.
exceptional students.
It was,
High
yes.
school apparently no longer exists.
That's right.
And then on to Columbia.
No, I went to City College.
City College, of course,
Yes.
and then to NYU Medical School, without the intention of practicing, I gather.
Never. I had always been interested in research as a career. I knew that when I went into medicine. That also was shaping things in accordance with the way I began to feel, in the sense of beginning to be aware of what I was interested in. I began to develop a self-awareness that began to lead me. I began to use...
Was it a natural process, or was it influenced by teachers?
I think it was a natural process. I think I observed and felt and chose, often not knowing why. I would say that what we call intuition was strongly operative, and it still is. I become aware and think about things that come to mind, so that I engage in the process of rationalizing what are the perceptions that seem to come from no place in particular.
So you've depended heavily, even as a scientist, upon that intuition, imagination, that other aspect of your being that's not the intellect?
I have always used both as strongly as I possibly could, so that I'm constantly challenging one with the other. I don't see how else I could function, and I believe that that is what we must aspire to ultimately. And when we speak of Epoch B, as we did a while back, and what it is that we should aspire to in the future, perhaps it is the development of both aspects of the mind that we referred to as the intuitive.
Can you develop the other aspect? The intellect obviously is developed by education, but how is the imagination, the intuitive aspect developed? By use?
Yes, by use and by not being inhibited and being turned off by hypertrophying the intellectual, for example. If we are aware and conscious of the existence of these two aspects of the mind and that each must be developed separately and then together, then we are beginning to comprehend the nature of the dualism, that man is the nature of the dualistic structure of the universe, and recognize that these two parts of the mind playing together are not unlike the two eyes that allow you to see, to have depth perception. If you look through one eye only, you do not see depth. You see everything in one plane. And I play with ideas such as these because I see the two-ness of the oneness, in a sense, which you're forced to recognize when you understand the nature of the processes of life. I suspect that the creative process and man's intelligence all are dependent upon the operation of these two realms.
After you had done 5 years or so of research with flu vaccine at the University of Michigan, he went to the University of Pittsburgh to take on a task of typing the polio virus.
No, I didn't go there for that purpose, but when I got there, someone provided me or offered me the opportunity to become so involved.
What has later turned out to be, of course, a most significant event might not have seemed at the moment to you to be that significant event. You had no idea, I suppose, at that moment where it might lead, did you?
Well, I suppose. I think I must have.
You had that hope at any rate, huh?
Well, it was obvious that this was the beginning of an evolutionary process. Certain things have to be known before you can know something else. I was quite young then, and polio was a problem that was clearly unsolved. It remained to be dealt with. And what one does in research is to make a beginning without knowing necessarily how quickly or even where you will end.
But you must make that beginning.
The beginning must be made. I call that commitment. You feel yourself drawn to, caught by, engaged and involved, and then one thing leads to another. I still am in that state of being and the state of becoming constantly in relation to other questions.
How did you feel that day in 1955 when the announcement was made that I guess the announcement was the vaccine works? Was it a feeling of achievement, satisfaction, or another beginning for a new challenge?
Yes, well, it was for me an anticlimax in the sense that I had already known, not the results. I heard about that for the first time that day.
After
it was unbelievable.
Over a year's testing, wasn't it?
Yes, but I knew that it had to be that way, or else we would have to say that immunization against diphtheria, which had been used for many years, didn't work. It was in conformity to a principle, and what was necessary was to determine how to determine whether or not that principle was applicable in this particular system. My life changed very abruptly at that time.
You became a public figure.
Yes. As Ed Murrow said that evening, I'll always remember it, young man, a great tragedy has just befallen you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you've lost your anonymity.
And it was a handicap.
Well, more than that, there have been many other aspects to that so-called success, which for me had many disadvantages, which I still am overcoming, you might say. One of the byproducts of this is to be looked upon as a hero by the public, but to to be looked upon by certain of your scientific colleagues as if you perpetrated the crime of having become a hero, and as if this was something you sought. Yes, and that's not acceptable. It evokes reactions which are quite understandable, because it's not only in this field, but it's in other fields as well. Consequently, if one, as I, want to continue in my métier, in my field of work, and in other related fields, I have that as a handicap.
So you've never been fully accepted by your own colleagues as you have by the public for what it is
Yes,
you've
there's
achieved?
a marked discrepancy between these two populations, you might say.
The institute, which was created later, became almost an escape for you from the public demands, did it not?
Well,
a chance to go back to laboratory work of the
Yes.
sort.
I created it for that purpose, thinking that this would be, well, I wasn't altogether conscious of the details. I simply was drawn to a conception of what I thought was needed in this country, for example, so far as institutions are concerned. I had the feeling in the mid-50s that institutions would have to evolve. I then became involved in creating a new instrument, you might say, to serve man's needs, to serve the purposes that an Institute for Biological Studies could serve.
Concerned as well with the moral and philosophical consequences of
Exactly.
science.
You see, we had just been through the cataclysm, in a way, of the successes and the accomplishments of physicists. Now, biologists were moving to the center of the stage. As I have said it before, I thought that an institute doing this kind of work should contain within it the conscience of man. And it was for this reason that I saw the need for creating an Institute for Biological Studies that would be concerned not only with biology, but with medical questions, but also would be humanistically oriented. This is still my hope and aspiration, although not yet altogether fulfilled. However, I am expecting that in time, because of the nature of the changes that are taking place on the human scene, that this will in fact be realized.
Let me ask you, with only 1.5 minute remaining, a big question. You've said that in Epoch B, the attributes that will be most prized will be those that give the feelings of satisfaction and fulfillment. Which in your life have given you the most satisfaction and fulfillment?
Everything that I've done, I suppose. It's all part of the same fabric, part of the same tapestry, if you will, and I can't say that any one thing more than another, because I cannot expect to have been more fortunate than I have been.
Thank you very much.